The Forgotten Tunnels. In a small town nestled near the Appalachian Mountains, an old legend spoke of a labyrinth of forgotten tunnels beneath the earth. The tunnels were said to be the remnants of an abandoned mining operation from the 1800s. Legend had it that miners who went too deep into the earth never returned, and strange noises could be heard from the tunnels at night. Daniel, an adventurous urban explorer, decided to investigate the tunnels. He gathered a group of friends and they set off, equipped with flashlights and ropes. As they descended into the darkness, the air grew colder, and the walls of the tunnels seemed to close in around them. They passed through narrow passages and caverns, the only sound being the echo of their footsteps. After hours of exploring, they came across an old, rusted gate. The gate was locked, but the chains were brittle and easily broken. Beyond the gate, the air became thick with an unsettling stench, like decaying flesh. They pressed on, curious and unnerved. As they ventured deeper, they stumbled upon old mining equipment and scattered bones, likely from animals. But then, they found something that made their blood run cold. A human skull, half buried in the dirt. Panicked, they decided to leave, but the way out seemed different. The tunnels appeared to have shifted, and they could no longer find the path they had come from. Fear set in as they wandered aimlessly, the darkness pressing in on them. Suddenly, they heard faint whispers, like a distant conversation. The whispers grew louder, turning into incoherent babbling. The group huddled together, their flashlights flickering. Then, out of the shadows, figures emerged. They were spectral, translucent, and dressed in old mining clothes. Their eyes were hollow, and they seemed to be reaching out, as if begging for help. Daniel's group screamed, running blindly through the tunnels. The specters followed, their whispers becoming anguished cries. In their frantic escape, Daniel tripped over something solid. He looked down and saw a rusted pickaxe. The ground beneath him was soft, and as he scrambled to his feet, he realized he was standing on a mound of bones. The realization hit him. These were the remains of the miners who had disappeared. The spectral figures were the lost souls, trapped forever in the darkness. Desperate, Daniel and his friends finally found the gate. They pushed through and ran for the surface. As they emerged into the daylight, they were greeted by a chilling sight. On the wall of the tunnel entrance, someone had scrawled in red paint, "We were forgotten. Now you will be too." The group never spoke of the experience again, and they left the town, haunted by the memory of the whispers and the lost souls. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the tunnels were calling him back, and that someday he might not be able to resist. The lurking. In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek, people prided themselves on the safety and tranquility of their community. But when a string of mysterious disappearances began, the idyllic facade cracked. The missing were all children, last seen playing near the edge of a dense, sprawling forest. Authorities combed the area but found no trace of the missing. Jessica, a single mother, was one of the many parents who feared for their children's safety. She kept a close eye on her 8-year-old son, Ben, especially after dark. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she noticed Ben's toy truck was left outside near the edge of the yard. She went out to retrieve it, calling for Ben to come inside. As she reached for the toy, she heard a rustling noise from the forest. Her heart raced, and she scanned the treeline. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but then she noticed something strange. A pair of yellow eyes staring at her from the shadows. Jessica froze, unable to move or scream. The eyes blinked and then disappeared into the darkness. Shaken, Jessica rushed inside, pulling Ben away from the window. She locked the doors and closed the curtains, trying to convince herself that it was just an animal. But that night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next day, Jessica noticed a small footprint in the dirt near the forest's edge. It was too large to belong to Ben and seemed to point towards the woods. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to investigate during daylight. She walked into the forest, following the faint trail of footprints. As she ventured deeper, the forest grew eerily quiet. The only sound was the crunch of leaves underfoot. She soon stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. The door creaked open, and an unsettling smell wafted out. Against her better judgment, she stepped inside. The cabin was dark and cluttered with old furniture and debris. But what caught her eye was a wall covered in photos of the missing children, including Ben. Jessica's blood ran cold. The photos were all dated, and the most recent one was from the day before. Panic set in as she realized the truth. Someone or something was watching her son. She turned to leave but was stopped by a figure blocking the doorway. It was a man, disheveled and wild-eyed, with a sinister grin. "Looking for something?" he sneered. Jessica's heart pounded as she backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The man stepped closer, and she caught a glimpse of something glinting in his hand. A knife. Thinking quickly, Jessica grabbed a nearby chair and threw it at him, then darted out of the cabin. She ran through the forest, branches clawing at her clothes, until she burst out into the open. Gasping for breath, she made it back to her house and locked the door behind her. She called the police, but by the time they arrived, the man and the photos were gone. The cabin, however, was real, and inside they found a hidden room filled with more photos and personal belongings of the missing children. Jessica moved away from Willow Creek with Ben, but she couldn't escape the nightmares. She knew the man was still out there, lurking in the shadows, watching, and she feared that one day he would come for her son. The sound of silence. Emma, a musician in New York City, thrived on the city's constant noise. One night, after returning from a late gig, she found her apartment unusually quiet. The power was out, and as she fumbled for candles, she noticed a faint hum emanating from the walls. It was a low, steady sound, almost like a distant tuning fork, and it seemed to grow louder with each passing moment. Curious and slightly unnerved, Emma pressed her ear against the wall. The hum grew clearer, resonating like a rhythmic pulsing. She dismissed it as an electrical issue, but as she moved through the apartment, the noise followed, becoming more intense. She tried to ignore it, lighting a few candles and settling down with her guitar to drown out the unsettling sound. However, as she strummed her guitar, the hum intensified, overshadowing her music. Suddenly, it stopped, plunging the room into an oppressive silence. Before she could process the abrupt quiet, a piercing scream erupted from the walls, an agonizing chorus of voices that seemed to shake the entire building. Emma dropped her guitar, covering her ears as the scream crescendoed into a horrifying, almost physical presence. Panic-stricken, she ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. The scream continued, a cacophony of pain and terror. The pressure in the room was suffocating, and just as quickly as it started, the noise ceased. The apartment was left in a terrifyingly complete silence. The power flickered back on, and the door finally opened, leaving Emma gasping for breath. Her neighbors, who had not heard the noise, looked at her with confusion and concern. The building management found no issues, and the episode was dismissed as a figment of her imagination. Yet, Emma knew what she experienced was real and utterly terrifying. She felt watched, as if the silence itself had eyes. Unable to shake the feeling of dread, Emma moved out of the apartment. But even after relocating, the memory of that night haunted her. She avoided playing her guitar, fearing the return of the scream. The experience had left an indelible mark on her psyche, and she began to fear silence as much as she once embraced the city's noise. Despite her efforts to forget, the memory of that chilling scream lingered. It was a reminder of something unseen and unknown, lurking just beyond the edge of perception. Emma couldn't escape the feeling that the sound was a manifestation of something deeper, an echo of an unfathomable terror. She wondered if, in the silence, it was waiting for her to listen again. The Watcher. In the rural town of Pine Creek, strange occurrences were often dismissed as figments of the imagination. But for Mia, what began as a curious anomaly quickly spiraled into a nightmare. Mia lived in an old farmhouse, passed down through her family for generations. The house had its quirks, creaking floors, drafty windows, but nothing had ever truly unsettled her until she found the letters. It started with a single envelope, placed neatly on her doorstep. Inside was a short, handwritten note. "I see you." No signature, no explanation. Mia laughed it off, assuming it was a prank. But then more letters arrived, each one more unsettling than the last. "You looked lovely in that blue dress yesterday. Do you like the flowers I left in the garden?" Mia grew increasingly paranoid. She hadn't noticed anyone watching her, but the letters were detailed, describing her daily routines, her favorite places in the house, even the books she was reading. She felt violated, her privacy shattered by an unseen observer. She installed locks, put up curtains, and even considered moving. But the letters continued. One night, unable to sleep, Mia sat in her living room, the curtains tightly drawn. She clutched the latest letter in her hand, her eyes darting around the room. Suddenly, she heard a faint tapping at the window. Her heart raced as she turned to look. Nothing. She stood, slowly approaching the window. The tapping continued, more insistent. She pulled back the curtain just a fraction, enough to peer outside. In the dim light, she saw a figure standing in the garden, holding something in its hand. It was a bouquet of flowers, the same kind she loved. Mia gasped, dropping the curtain. She stumbled back, her breath shallow and fast. The figure outside remained motionless, just watching. Mia grabbed her phone and dialed the police. They arrived quickly, but by the time they searched the property, the figure was gone. All they found were the flowers, arranged neatly on the porch. The police took the letters and promised to investigate, but Mia could see in their eyes that they didn't believe her. To them, it was just a prank, a harmless stalker. But Mia knew better. The letters grew more intimate, more menacing. They spoke of things only someone inside the house could know. "I love watching you sleep. Your nightmares are my favorite." Mia felt trapped, her home no longer a sanctuary but a cage. She stopped leaving the house, terrified of what might happen if she did. One evening, as the sun set, Mia decided to confront her fear. She sat in the living room, all the lights off, and waited. The hours passed slowly, the silence heavy. Then, just as the clock struck midnight, she heard it, a soft rustling from the hallway. She stood, her heart pounding, and crept towards the sound. As she reached the hallway, she saw a shadowy figure standing at the end. It was the same figure from the garden, tall and indistinct. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She reached for the light switch, but before she could flip it, the figure spoke. "You shouldn't have looked," it whispered, the voice low and chilling. Mia froze, the words sending a shiver down her spine. The figure stepped closer, and in the dim light, she could make out a face, pale with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. Mia screamed, turning and running back to the living room. She fumbled with her phone, dialing the police again. But as she glanced back at the hallway, the figure was gone. The police arrived minutes later, finding her trembling in a corner, the letters scattered around her. This time they took her seriously. They searched the house thoroughly and found a hidden crawlspace in the attic. Inside, they discovered a makeshift bed, old food wrappers, and a collection of Mia's belongings, including a journal detailing her every move. The intruder had been living in her house for weeks, maybe longer, watching her, studying her. The realization was horrifying. Mia moved out the next day, leaving behind the farmhouse and the nightmares that came with it. The police never caught the watcher, and the case went cold. To this day, Mia lives with the fear that the watcher is still out there, somewhere, waiting for the right moment to return. The letters stopped, but the memory of those hollow eyes and that twisted smile never left her. And every time she feels a chill in the air or hears a rustle in the night, she wonders if the watcher has found her again.